I cannot in good conscience make a D&D basics video because I don't think I understand D&D. Yes, I am currently the dungeon master of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. However, it doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. A lot of the times it's less I understand what's going on and more I'm really good at seeming like I know what's going on. I find Dungeons and Dragons to be very confusing and complicated in a lot of ways, and I understand parts of it, and I enjoy how I play with my friends, but as far as explaining what it is as a game, However, I do have plans to talk more about different tabletop role-playing game stuff later this month. And Graham went on a one-day wild road trip for VEDS and has only requested this kind of video, and dag nabbit, he's earned it. I don't know, hopefully some of this is helpful, and maybe someone else will fly in and actually do a good D&D basics video like was asked for. Anyway, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game. Tabletop role-playing games, sometimes known as pen and paper role-playing games, are games that are played in the land of imagination. If you were playing an RPG that was like a video game or a computer game, you'd be playing it on a console and be in this digital world and have a character who could do certain things and you'd control them. With tabletop RPGs, you're just describing what your character is doing. And that's basically it. You're just role-playing, playing together, playing pretend, and kind of talking. Okay, obviously there's more to it, but that's the basics. That's why I like it. The stuff that I understand less are the mechanics of the game. And this differs from game to game, but basically the mechanics dictate how well your character does things. So for a lot of these games, there's a game master or dungeon master, so GM or DM, and then players. And they play characters, so they're referred to as PCs, player characters. Characters in tabletop RPGs, just like in digital role-playing games, have certain skill sets, and different kind of characters are going to be better at some things than others. So these mechanics of the character, as far as like their statistics or their skills, this is where dice come into play. At least in most tabletop RPGs that I've encountered. I imagine there's some that don't use dice. And different RPGs use different dice in different ways. Okay, we've moved to a rare, in real time, not sped up, overhead camera moment, because while editing, I realized the part where I tried to talk about dice was just a capital M mess. So, instead I'm gonna try to do just a very quick, more visual thing here. We'll see how it goes. Also, I am straight up not talking about like combat as far as like D&D goes, because I don't feel like I understand it well enough to accurately talk about. So, what you gonna do? All right. Anyway, we got dice. There are different kinds of dice. Us nerd folks refer to dice by the number of sides they have. So most common, I feel like, in like board games are D6s. That's dice 6 sides. Da-da-da-da. And then we got all different kinds. D4, D8, D10, D12. So it's the number of sides the dice has. Different RPGs, like I mentioned in past footage. Words. Sorry. In D&D, you usually roll a d20, and depending on the skills of the character you're playing, you can add or subtract numbers to it. So for example, let's take Stick Figure Abby here. Stick Figure Abby is not very strong. So their strength skill gives them a -1 to whatever they roll. You see that? And then Stick Figure Abby, though, is very charismatic, so their charisma gets a +1. So if Stick Figure Abby was to face a bad guy, and Stick Figure Abby was like, I want to try to punch them, Stick Figure Abby, for them we'd roll a d20. I got a 7. We would subtract 1, though, so that's a 6. Not a very good roll. But if instead Stick Figure Abby's like, I'm going to try to talk my way out of this, maybe roll a charisma check to try to talk their way out of it. Roll a d20, add that 14. Oh, not bad. That might work, depending on how smart the guy is. That's a very basic version. There's more math stuff to it that I don't understand, so I'm not going to talk about. This is not the end-all be-all, though. In different systems, one of which is Kids on Bikes, which is inspired by like the Goonies and Stranger Things, the ideas of it's a small town, big mystery, where you have skills and you assign a different kind of die to each skill. So if strength is low for Stick Figure Abby, I'd give them the D4 because it's the least amount of sides, so I can only ever roll as high as a 4. And then for charisma, super charismatic, I'd assign that one the D20. So each skill has a different die. So if I wanted a really charismatic character, I'd give it the D20. If I wanted a really strong character, I'd put it over here, and then maybe it's not so charismatic. And then depending on what you got, it depends on how well you do. So that is the very basics, pretty bad explanation of how dice works in these games. I tried. So those, I think, are the basics of tabletop role-playing games. You are playing pretend with folks. Usually there's one person kind of guiding the story. I do say usually because there are some systems where it's not that, but this is a basics video. I'm trying to keep it to the basics. But we got player characters who say, I want to try doing this thing. And then the game master or the dungeon master or the master of ceremonies, whatever name they have, responds with, okay, if you want to do that, make this kind of skills check. We'll see if you accomplish it. Then depending on whether they do or not, the story unfolds. You can probably tell from this video that the mechanical end of it is not where it's not my strong suit. I think I said that already, but I can barely remember what I said 2 seconds ago, so who can say? I play tabletop role-playing games because I like playing pretend. I've liked playing pretend ever since I was little. I continue to like it as an adult. At some point in growing up, I was told that adults aren't supposed to do that anymore, and then I discovered role-playing games like this, and I was like, oh, no, we can do this, and it's fun and healthy and a great creative outlet. So when I'm playing role-playing games with friends, we are usually in it for the story and the role-playing. We're here to play pretend, which is why it kind of works. The group I'm in playing D&D, it's okay that even though I'm the DM, I don't have encyclopedic knowledge about all the monsters in D&D or every little detail about the world. I'm sure there are people, I know there are people who play because they enjoy the mechanics. Different people like to play in different ways. So I guess my one big tip is if you are interested in Dungeons and Dragons or another tabletop role-playing game, think about why you want to play. What about this sort of game interests you? And then let that determine which one you choose as well as who you want to play with. I was recently introduced to a new-to-me tabletop role-playing game, and I have hinted at this game multiple times this month because it's one of my new favorites, and I will get to it in a future video. I promise. But until then, I hope this was somewhat helpful. If it wasn't helpful, hopefully it was at least a wee bit entertaining. And if nothing else, it was at least a video for today, which is my goal, seeing as it is VEDS. Until tomorrow, I really love y'all. Bye.